Marcus Harrington leaned back in his leather chair and closed his eyes for a moment. He had built his fortune from nothing. As a boy, he sold lemonade on hot summer days and mowed lawns in his neighborhood. Years later, those small hustles became a thriving tech company. Now at 45, he owned several homes, luxury cars, and a lavish office in downtown Atlanta. He was used to making big decisions quickly, trusting his gut and his sharp mind. Yet today, his heart pounded in his chest, and he felt an unfamiliar tightness in his throat. He glanced around his spacious living room, floor-to-ceiling windows, framed a view of the city skyline, its tall buildings glowing in the afternoon sun. A grand piano sat in one corner, its black surface gleaming. A chandelier of crystals hung over the marble floor, casting scattered rainbows across the room. Everything looked perfect, but Marcus felt uneasy. He had just discovered a prime piece of property, a historic building in the heart of the Arts District. Its red brick walls, tall arched windows, and wrought-iron balcony reminded him of old European streets. He imagined turning it into a mixed-use space with art galleries on the ground floor, loft apartments above, and a cafe tucked into a cozy nook. The place would be a crown jewel in his growing real estate portfolio. Yet the contract he held weighed heavily in his hands. That morning, he had pored over the papers with his legal team. They had highlighted a clause in small print saying, "It was standard." Marcus had skimmed the dense text and moved on. His team assured him the deal was solid. The price was excellent, and the seller seemed eager. Marcus expected to sign before the weekend and start renovations by next month. But now, something told him to pause. He tapped his fingers on the mahogany desk. His assistant, Jenna, peeked in with a fresh cup of coffee. "Another one, sir," she asked with a polite smile. "Thanks," Marcus said, accepting the mug. He took a slow sip, the warmth spreading through him. "I'm fine. Just thinking." "It's a big investment," Jenna said softly. "You want everything right." He nodded. "Exactly." As she left, the door closed with a gentle click. Marcus stared at the contract again. He could not explain why he felt unsettled. He was good at spotting risks and rewards. He prided himself on his instincts. But today his instincts whispered doubt. He tried to focus on the numbers, the projected profits, the city's growth statistics. Everything pointed up, yet that uneasy feeling would not let go. Across the house, Celeste moved quietly through the hallway. She had been Marcus's housekeeper for 6 months now. Before that, she had worked for a prominent family in Savannah. And before that, she cared for elderly neighbors who lived alone. Celeste had seen many houses and many people. She was calm, steady, and respectful. When she worked, she hummed soft tunes from her youth. Her clothes were neat, her hair pinned back in a bun. She carried herself with quiet confidence. Today, she noticed Marcus's house felt different. He had left his office door slightly ajar, and Celeste saw the papers on his desk. Late afternoon light spilled into the room, illuminating every detail. Celeste paused by the doorway, her eyes narrowing as she glanced at the page lying open. Something caught her attention. A sentence in tiny print, halfway down the page, that warned about penalties if any work changed the building's exterior. Those words reminded her of a case she had heard about years ago, a man who built a new patio. Without checking regulations and ended up paying a hefty fine, she remembered the heartbreak on his wife's face. It was a painful memory, but it taught her to notice small details. Housework was more than dusting and vacuuming. It was about caring for a home and the people who lived in it. Carefully, she stepped into the office. She moved with purpose, but softly, so as not to startle Marcus. She picked up the contract and studied the clause again. It granted the seller the right to impose a fine if the facade changed in any way, including painting or installing modern fixtures. For a renovation scheme like Marcus planned, this could be disastrous. The penalty could reach hundreds of thousands of dollars. She inhaled slowly. Marcus was a man of action. He'd like to move forward at full speed. If he missed this clause, he could lose a fortune. She closed her eyes for a moment, thinking back to the lessons her grandmother taught her about speaking up, even when it felt difficult. Say what you see, her grandmother would say. Celeste opened her eyes and walked out of the room. In the kitchen, Marcus leaned against the counter, stirring his coffee slowly. Celeste entered, her posture straight but calm. Marcus looked up, surprised to see her there. "Good evening, Miss Celeste," he said. She nodded. "Good evening, Mr. Harrington." She set the contract on the counter. "I was in your office earlier. I saw something in your papers I think you should read again." "Oh? I thought my lawyer went through everything." She kept her voice gentle. "There's a part in the contract about changing the outside of the building. It says the owner can fine you if you alter the facade in any way." She pointed to the clause. "It looks like it covers painting, new fixtures, even replacing windows." Marcus frowned and reached for his mug. "I don't remember that," he said, squinting at the tiny text. "My team said it was standard. I guess I skipped over it." Celeste watched him carefully. "I've heard a story once where a man paid thousands for a new patio without checking. The rules cost him more than he earned in rent." She paused. "I just thought you should know." Marcus put his cup down and stood still. For a moment, he looked away, staring into the stainless steel sink. A knot tightened in his chest. Then he turned back to Celeste. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Really? Thank you." She smiled softly. "You're welcome, sir." Later that night, Marcus could not sleep. He lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling. The city lights twinkled through the curtains, thought about the deal, the old building, the art galleries he wanted to open. He imagined people strolling through sunlit halls, laughing in a cafe corner, artists showing their work on exposed brick walls. He had built a life on big ideas coming to life. Yet now, one small clause threatened it all. He rolled over and reached for his phone. He called Jenna. "I'm going downtown to the law firm. Tell him not to send the deal papers. Tonight, we need to hold off." There was a pause. Then Jenna replied, "Of course, Mr. Harrington. I'll let them know." He hung up and closed his eyes, feeling both relief and dread. Relief that he had paused, dread of what might come next. Tomorrow he would face his lawyer in the cellars. Representative, they might be angry. They might say he was wasting time. But he felt sure he had done the right thing. At dawn, Celeste arrived for work and found the house quiet. The front door was open and the foyer lights still on. She stepped inside and heard a soft hum from the kitchen. Marcus was there, staring out the window at the street below. His reflection looked tired but determined. He turned when he saw her. "Miss Celeste," he said softly, "I want you to help me with this." Her heart skipped a beat. "Yes, sir." He gestured to the contract. Papers spread across the table. "Walk me through everything you see. I want your input." Celeste's eyes widened. Then she smiled. She pulled up a chair and sat beside him. Together, they picked up each page, reading every word. Marcus listened to her comments, her questions, her gentle warnings. As the morning sun rose higher, he felt a renewed sense of confidence. With Celeste's wisdom beside his own ambition, he knew he could make the right choice for this building and for his dream of bringing art and life to that red brick facade. In that quiet kitchen, a millionaire and his maid formed an unlikely team. One brought ambition and vision, the other brought years of humble experience and a keen eye. Their partnership began not with grand speeches or flashy deals, but with a simple warning: read the small print. And in that moment, a new chapter opened for both of them, one built on trust, respect, and the power of seeing what others overlook. Celeste always believed that small things could make a big difference. A word spoken at the right time, a gesture of care, a soft warning. These moments could change the course of someone's life. She had seen it before, especially during her years working in other people's homes. She watched families rise and fall, sometimes because of pride, sometimes because they missed the warning signs that came gently, not loudly. She never thought she'd find herself in the middle of something like this, especially not in a millionaire's home. But deep down, she felt it. Something about that contract wasn't right. After her quiet conversation with Marcus in the kitchen, Celeste returned to her usual tasks. She dusted shelves, polished glass, and wiped down counters. But her mind stayed on that paper and on Marcus's face when she pointed out the clause. He had looked surprised, even a little shaken, but not angry. That told her something important. He was a man who could listen. Not all wealthy people were like that. Meanwhile, Marcus sat in his study, the contract open again in front of him. He had read it twice already, but still couldn't believe what he had missed. The clause about fines for altering the outside of the building seemed almost hidden. The font was small, so the wording was confusing. It mentioned city regulations, historic district policies, and something called a preservation agreement. Had skimmed past it the first time, thinking it didn't apply to him. But Celeste's quiet warning had pulled him back. He picked up the phone and called his lawyer. "Evan, we need to go through this again," Marcus said. "There's a clause I didn't fully understand. I want your honest opinion." Evan was silent for a moment. "Which clause?" "Section 23, Marcus replied. "About the building's exterior." Celeste found it. The maid. Marcus didn't like the tone of surprise in Evan's voice. Yes, she spotted something. "I didn't." "Well," Evan said, clearing his throat, "I can look at it again. But those clauses are often just formalities." "Maybe," Marcus said, "but I'm not signing anything until we're sure." He hung up the phone and sat back in his chair. His mind wandered to all the times he had ignored small signs in the past. Like the time he invested in a startup that looked great on paper, but he had a strange feeling during the pitch meeting. He'd ignored that feeling, and the company folded in 6 months. This time he wouldn't make that mistake again. Later that evening, the house was quiet. Marcus walked into the kitchen to make tea. He wasn't much of a tea drinker, but tonight he wanted something calming. As he waited for the water to boil, he saw Celeste walk by with a basket of folded laundry. "Celeste," he called softly. She turned. "Yes, sir." He leaned on the counter. "Do you mind telling me what made you look at the contract in the first place?" Celeste paused. "I didn't mean to pry. I was dusting your desk and saw the papers. Something about the wording caught my eye." "Have you worked with contracts before?" She gave a small smile. "Not directly. But I worked for a man once who lost a lot of money because of something similar. He built a deck behind his house. It turned out the house was in a restricted zone. The city made him take it down and fined him too. I remember how upset he was. I helped pack his things when he moved out." Marcus listened carefully. "You remembered all that, ... just from one sentence." Celeste nodded. "Sometimes the little things are the most important." He nodded slowly. "Thank you for saying something. I mean that." She didn't answer right away, and she said gently, "I've seen people lose more than money because they didn't listen in time." Marcus took those words with him as he walked back into his study. He stayed up late rereading the contract again. He made notes. He called Jenna and asked her to delay tomorrow's meeting with the seller. He even opened his laptop and researched the city's building laws. What he found made him sit up straight. The building he wanted was indeed in a protected district. Any changes to its outer structure had to be approved by a special city board. Renovations, including replacing windows or changing doorways, needed written approval. And if those rules weren't followed, the penalties could be large and fast. Marcus sighed deeply. His entire plan depended on updating the building. He had already talked to architects about removing certain windows and adding a rooftop terrace. But if those changes required approval, and approval was denied, he'd be stuck with a beautiful building that couldn't be changed. Worse, he'd be stuck with a property he couldn't use the way he intended. The next morning, Marcus arrived. At his office early, he called a meeting with his lawyer, his financial advisor, and his real estate agent. They sat around a long table, each with a copy of the contract. "Did anyone read Section 23? Marcus asked quietly. The room fell silent. Then Evan cleared his throat. "Yes, but I assumed it wouldn't be a problem. These clauses usually don't cause issues unless someone does something drastic." "What if I wanted to change the windows?" Marcus asked. "Well," Evan said, looking unsure, "technically, you'd need approval. And if I don't get approval," Evan looked down, "then you'd be fined. Maybe heavily." Marcus nodded, then looked at his real estate agent. Why didn't you tell me about this risk? The agent shifted in his seat. Honestly, didn't think it would matter. Most buyers don't notice that part. Marcus stood up. Well, I noticed. Or rather, Celeste noticed. My housekeeper. The three men looked at each other awkwardly. Marcus didn't care. He was glad someone had paid attention. Cancel the meeting with the seller, Marcus said. I'm not signing until we fix this. That evening, back at home, Marcus found Celeste in the garden, watering plants. You probably saved me a lot of trouble. She looked up with a gentle smile. I'm glad I said something. Marcus sat on the garden bench. I used to think being smart meant moving fast, making decisions quickly. But I'm learning that sometimes it's the quiet voices we need to hear. Celeste nodded. Speed is good, but stillness sees what rushing misses. They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the sound of leaves rustling in the breeze. Marcus felt grateful for the warning, for the chance to pause, and for the wisdom of someone others might have overlooked. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Marcus made a decision. He would go deeper into the deal before signing anything. He would ask more questions, read every line, and never underestimate the people around him, especially those like Celeste, who spoke softly but saw clearly. And so, a quiet warning turned into a turning point. Not just for a deal, but for a man learning to listen, trust, and look beyond titles. What began as a simple pause would soon lead to a discovery far more surprising than he ever imagined. Marcus Harrington walked into the tall glass building where his lawyer's office was located. It was early morning, and the city was still waking up. Cars moved slowly through the streets, and the sky above was a soft gray. Marcus usually felt excited before signing a big deal. It gave him a sense of power and progress. But today, his steps were slower. Something didn't feel right. Celeste's warning echoed in his mind like a quiet bell that wouldn't stop ringing. He reached the 15th floor and walked into the waiting area. A receptionist smiled and offered him coffee, but he waved it off. He was focused, but not in his usual confident way. His briefcase was in one hand, the contract in the other. He sat down in the leather chair and looked again at the contract. His eyes moved directly to Section 23. Exterior changes must be approved by the Historic Preservation Board. Failure to comply may result in legal and financial penalties. He read it again and again. Each time the words felt heavier. This wasn't just a suggestion, it was a rule, a strong one. If he signed the contract without addressing it, he would be locked into a property he couldn't freely use. His entire plan to modernize, renovate, and raise the building's value could be blocked. And worse, he might have to pay fines. If he moved ahead without approval, he leaned back in his chair, fingers tapping the armrest. How did his legal team miss this? Or worse, did they see it and just ignore it, thinking he wouldn't care? That made him feel something he didn't. Like doubt. Doubt in the people he trusted. Doubt in the process he used for years. A few minutes later, Evan, his lawyer, walked in. He looked cheerful, ready for a successful meeting. Marcus, good to see you. Ready to make this official? Marcus didn't smile. He raised the contract and pointed at the clause. We're not signing this today. Evan blinked. Excuse me, Section 23, Marcus said. It could ruin the entire deal. We didn't discuss this in enough detail. Evan's voice grew quieter. I thought it wouldn't be a problem. Most buyers don't worry about it. Well, I'm not most buyers, Marcus said. I plan to renovate the exterior. Big changes, new windows, possibly a rooftop lounge. If I can't do that, I can't move forward. Evan sat down, now taking things more seriously. Okay, let's go through it carefully. For the next hour, they went line by line. Marcus asked questions. Evan gave cautious answers. They looked up city codes, reviewed past rulings from the historic board, and even found a case where a similar building owner had to undo his renovations and pay over $200,000 in fines. That settled it. Marcus stood up and said firmly, I'm freezing the deal. Evan looked surprised. You don't want to renegotiate? Not yet, Marcus said. First, I need to speak with the seller directly. I want them to remove, or change the clause, or lower the price to match the risk. Evan nodded slowly. That's fair. As Marcus left the law office, he felt a strange mixture of relief and frustration. Relief that he caught the problem in time. Frustration that it almost slipped past him. He walked down the street toward his car. The sky had cleared, and the sun now shined between the buildings. He rolled down his window as he drove home, letting the breeze hit his face. For once, he wasn't thinking about money. He was thinking about trust. Back at his house, Celeste was watering the front garden. Marcus pulled into the driveway and got out. He didn't speak at first. He just watched her, carefully pouring water around the roots of his rose bushes. She looked up and gave a polite nod. "Morning, Mr. Harrington." "Morning," Marcus said. He stepped closer. "I went to the law office. I didn't sign." Paused. "Oh, you were right," he said. "That small clause could have cost me more than I ever expected." Celeste didn't smile or show surprise. She just said, "I'm glad you checked." Marcus crossed his arms. "I have to admit something. I almost signed anyway, even after your warning. I told myself it would all work out, that I could fix problems later. But when I held the pen to sign, I froze." Celeste tilted her head. Gently. "What made you stop?" "I thought of you," he said. "Standing in my kitchen, speaking calmly, telling me to look again. That moment stayed with me." Celeste looked down at the flowers. Sometimes the quietest voices are the ones we hear the longest. Marcus let those words sink in. Then he asked something that surprised even him. "Can I show you the building?" She looked up. "The one you were going to buy?" He nodded. "Yes, I want your opinion." Celeste looked thoughtful. "All right." That afternoon, Marcus drove Celeste downtown. It was the first time she had been in one of his cars. The seats were soft leather, and soft jazz played on the radio. Marcus pointed out shops, schools, and historic landmarks along the way. When they arrived, he parked in front of the red brick building. Celeste got out and looked up. The building stood proud, with tall windows and iron balconies. It had stories to tell. Stories of past tenants, art exhibits, maybe even love stories whispered through its hallways. She slowly walked around it, taking everything in. Marcus followed. "Behind her, it's beautiful," she said finally. "I think so too," Marcus replied. "But now, I wonder if it's worth the fight. The rules, the delays, the city board, it might take years." Celeste turned to him. "Do you love it enough to wait?" Marcus didn't answer right away. He looked up at the building, at the sky above it, and at the busy streets around it. Then he said, "Maybe, if I can work with the rules instead of against them." She nodded. "That's the smart way." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Marcus said, "You know, my team didn't catch that clause, but you did. I think I've been relying too much on people with titles and forgetting the wisdom of people who've seen life from every angle." Celeste gave a small smile. "Sometimes you don't need letters behind your name to know something is wrong." As they drove home, Marcus felt lighter. He hadn't made millions by accident. But today he realized that success wasn't just about big risks. It was also about knowing when to stop, ask questions, and listen. When they returned to the house, Marcus turned to Celeste before she stepped out. "Would you be okay helping me review things from time to time? I value how you see things." Celeste looked surprised but pleased. "If you think I can help, then yes." That night, Marcus didn't work late. He made himself dinner, watched an old movie, and thought about the deal he nearly signed. One quiet voice had changed everything. He now knew that freezing in that moment when the pen touched paper was the smartest move he had made all year. That night, when the city lights blinked on one by one, Marcus walked into his home feeling a mix of tension and relief. He set his briefcase down by the door and found Celeste folding towels in the laundry room. She looked up with her gentle smile and asked, "Everything all right, sir?" Marcus paused, then said, "I need to know more about what you told me today. How did you learn to spot that clause so quickly?" Celeste laid the towels on a shelf and turned toward him. "Years ago," she began softly, "I worked for a real estate developer in Savannah. He was building townhouses on an old lot. Day I was dusting his desk and saw a line in the permit papers, about drainage rules. It was buried in the middle of the text. I mentioned it to him. I said, "You might want to check this before you start digging." He laughed it off. His lawyer had it handled. Marcus leaned against the wall, listening closely. Celeste continued, "They dug anyway. A week later, the city shut them down. The water ran off into the neighbor's yard. The fine was high, plus they had to refill the hole. My boss lost more than $20,000. I had to put the project on hold, and some families waiting for homes had to wait longer. I remember how upset he was. His dreams for that project fell apart because he ignored one small warning." Marcus rubbed his chin, thinking of his own deal. He admired how calmly Celeste told her story. There was no blame in her voice, only a wish that someone would have listened sooner. "Thank you for sharing that," he said. "I don't want to end up in that position." He reached for his phone. "I'm calling Evan right now." He dialed his lawyer's direct line and waited. When Evan answered, Marcus spoke steadily. "Evan, it's Marcus. I need you to renegotiate the contract. Tell the seller I can't. Accept Section 23 as it stands. I want them to remove that clause or drop the price to match the risk." Evan's voice cracked slightly with surprise. "Marcus, the seller is ready to close. They'll be furious at any delay." "I know," Marcus said firmly, "but I can't sign until I'm protected. That clause could cost me more than I'm paying for the building." He paused. "Please call them tonight. Let me know what they say." Marcus hung up, feeling the weight of the moment. He knew the seller had the upper hand, but he also knew he held all the cards until he signed. A few hours later, his phone rang again. It was Evan. "They're upset," Evan said, "but they're willing to discuss. They'll agree to lower the price by 5% if we accept the clause. Or they'll remove the clause but raise the price by 3%. Marcus considered the options, thought of Celeste's story and of the high stakes. "Tell them we accept nothing less than clause removal at the original price," he said. "If they won't do that, we walk away." Evan sighed. "Understood, I'll let you know." The next morning, the seller's representative showed up unannounced at Marcus's door. He was a tall man in a crisp suit, his expression polite, but firm. Marcus invited him into the living room. They both sat on opposite ends of the sofa. Collected and calm, Marcus spoke first. "Thank you for coming. I want to talk about Section 23. He gestured to the contract on the coffee table. "I can't accept those restrictions. My vision for the property depends on making some changes to the exterior." The representative nodded. "I understand your plans, Mr. Harrington, but those rules protect the historic character of the building. We can't just remove that clause." Marcus leaned forward. "I respect the history. I love it, in fact. But if I can't update windows or add lighting, my project won't work. It'll sit unused and neither of us benefits. I propose we remove the clause and keep the original price." They sat in silence for a moment, the morning sun shining through the windows. Celeste, who had been dusting a nearby shelf, watched quietly. She didn't speak until Marcus looked at her. Then she nodded and left the room so they could talk. Several hours later, they emerged with an amended contract. The clause was gone. The price stayed the same. The seller shook Marcus's hand and said, "It's rare to meet a buyer who knows exactly what he wants and won't back down. You have a deal." Marcus exhaled deeply as the representative left. He turned to Celeste, who had been waiting in the hallway. "We did it," he said softly. Celeste smiled. "I'm happy for you." He walked her back inside and said, "I couldn't have done it without you. Your warning changed everything." He offered her a cup of tea, and they sat together in the kitchen. Marcus felt a warmth of gratitude he hadn't expected. He realized that a true partnership could form between people from very different parts of life. Word soon spread through his office and among his friends. They heard how Marcus had paused a deal worth millions and renegotiated based on a maid's insight. Some teased him gently, but most respected what he had done. They admired that he valued someone's careful observation over a fast signature. Marcus felt proud, not of the money he saved, but of the respect he had shown to another person's wisdom. At the next team meeting, Marcus called everyone together. He held up the amended contract and said, "This document is better because someone I trust pointed out a hidden risk. I want you all to remember, never ignore small warnings. They can save you from big losses." He looked at Celeste, who sat quietly in the back of the room. Then he added, "And sometimes the best advice comes from people without fancy titles. I'd like to thank Celeste, who works in this house, for helping me see what I missed." Round of applause filled the room. Celeste's cheeks flushed with surprise and pride. Marcus introduced her as a partner in his success. He then invited her to a small, celebratory lunch with his team. For someone who had only intended to dust shelves, Celeste found herself sitting among lawyers, advisors, and architects, sharing stories and laughter. After the lunch, Marcus walked Celeste to her car parked at the curb. He held open the door for her and said, "Thank you again. If you ever need anything, just ask." She smiled and shook her head. "I'm just glad I could help, sir." Over the next weeks, as renovations began, Marcus consulted Celeste on small details: where to place a light here, how to protect old brick there. She carried sample brochures and city code booklets, helping him stay within rules while still achieving his vision. Their partnership grew naturally, built on trust and mutual respect. In the end, the historic building reopened. As a vibrant space for art and community, the grand opening drew a crowd that marveled at the blend of old and new. Artists hung paintings on exposed brick walls. Visitors strolled past tall windows that once almost went unchanged. The cafe corner buzzed with conversation. Marcus stood by Celeste's side as the ribbon was cut, raised a glass of sparkling cider, and said, "To vision, and to the quiet voices that guide us." Celeste clinked her glass against his. She felt a gentle pride. That day, she saw how one small warning could reshape a life in a building. And Marcus learned that true success comes not only from big ideas and bold moves, but from listening, pausing, and valuing every voice, no matter how quiet. Marcus watched from the edge of the gallery as guests drifted in, their eyes lighting up when they saw the bright paintings on the old brick walls. It was opening night, and the place was buzzing with excitement. He stood beside Celeste, who wore a simple dress and a warm smile. They had worked so hard to bring this vision to life, and now it gleamed under the soft spotlights. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. He handed it to Celeste, who raised her eyebrows in surprise. Inside was a check for a year's bonus, more than she had ever earned before. But Marcus wasn't done. "This is for your wisdom and care," he told her, "and for every time you reminded me to look closer." Celeste's hands trembled slightly as she held the envelope. She looked at Marcus, then back at the check, and tears welled up in her eyes. "Thank you, sir," she said softly. "I never thought I would be here." Marcus smiled. "You belong here as much as anyone." Your voice changed everything. Around them, friends and family of artists chatted, glasses clinked, and the air filled with music. Marcus introduced Celeste to the gallery's artists, who shook her hand and thanked her for helping make their space possible. She felt a glow of pride she had never known before. After the formal parts of the evening ended, Marcus led Celeste to a quiet corner near a tall window. The moonlight poured in, and the street below was calm compared to the lively room behind them. He handed her a folder. Inside were papers for a small scholarship fund he had set up in her name. The fund would help her grandchildren pay for college or vocational training. "Use this for your family," he said. "You care for so many people already. Now it's my turn to care for yours." Celeste opened the folder, reading the plan he outlined: yearly grants, simple application forms, and clear criteria. She looked up, speechless, as she started, then caught her breath. "I can't accept this." Marcus reached out, and I gently closed the folder. "Yes, you can. You deserve it." Celeste shook her head slowly. "I was just doing my job." Marcus laughed softly. "Doormen, drivers, and lawyers all do their jobs too. But not all of them save $1 million. Deals with a quiet warning." She smiled, touched by his words. "It's not quiet sometimes," she admitted. "But thank you, truly." Weeks passed and the gallery settled into its new life. Art classes filled the studios upstairs. Coffee and pastries served in the cafe corner became a morning ritual. For neighbors, the building thrived, as Marcus and his team had hoped. Yet the real change happened in Marcus's own home. He asked Celeste to join him each Thursday afternoon to go over plans, not just for real estate, but for daily matters, new hires, home repairs, even holiday menus. He valued her opinions on everything from the color of the living room drapes to the wording of his emails. Their partnership became a steady routine, built on respect and shared purpose. One Thursday, Marcus and Celeste sat at the kitchen table, drinking tea and poring over interior design samples. Marcus pointed at a swatch of fabric. "What do you think of this?" he asked. Celeste studied the pattern, then said, "It's lovely, but maybe too bright for the library. You want something calming for reading." He nodded. "You're right about this softer blue." She suggested another sample. This simple back and forth carried a sense of camaraderie neither had expected. Marcus found that listening slowed his mind in a good way, letting him see things more clearly. Over time, employees at Marcus's company noticed the change in his leadership. He became more patient in meetings, asking questions before giving orders. He credited Celeste for teaching him to pause, to listen, and to respect every perspective. At a company retreat, he shared their story, how a maid's careful eye had saved a building and had taught him a vital lesson about humility. His team applauded, and some even stood with Celeste by his side, thanking her for her role. She blushed as people approached to shake her hand, saying how much they admired her courage. Back at home, Celeste found herself dreaming of new possibilities. She enrolled in a short course on property management, wanting to learn more about the world Marcus had opened for her. Each week, she spent an hour with Marcus's books, reading about zoning laws and design principles. He encouraged her, bringing home old blueprints and inviting her to studio tours. Their home office filled with the smell of old paper and fresh ink as they sat side by side, learning together. Celeste loved the chance to grow and felt valued in a way she never had before. One rainy afternoon, Marcus knocked on her front door. He held a small box wrapped in plain brown paper. "I thought you might like this," he said, handing it to her. Inside was a tablet loaded with digital plans for their next project. Community center they wanted to build near Marcus's other properties. They planned art studios for local youth, a computer lab, and rooms for community meetings. Celeste turned it on and scrolled through the colorful diagrams. "You want to build this?" she asked, astonished. "Yes," Marcus said.
I want
"Your help again. You have an eye for what people need. Let's do it together." Her heart leaped. She thought of the children in her old neighborhood, the seniors who struggled to find a warm place to gather. She saw the faces of her grandchildren and imagined them studying in bright light, tapping away on keyboards. "I'd love to," she said at last, her voice steady with excitement. "Then it's settled," Marcus said with a grin. "We're partners." As months passed, the community center took shape. Marcus and Celeste visited the construction site every week. They walked through empty rooms, imagining bookshelves in one corner and a stage in another. Workers smiled when they saw Celeste greeting her by name. She offered kind words and careful questions, making sure each brick was straight and each corner was safe. Marcus watched her with pride. She moved through the site with confidence, helping solve small problems before they grew. It felt like a dream come true. Someone who once dusted his shelves now guided architects and engineers with clear advice. On opening day, children rushed in, parents followed, and elders gathered for tea in the new lounge. Paintings decorated the walls, and computers hummed in the lab. Marcus and Celeste cut the ribbon together, their hands intertwined around the scissors. As they stepped back, applause rang out. Celeste blinked at the crowd, then looked at Marcus, whose eyes shone with joy. He whispered, "We did this." She nodded, feeling tears of happiness. "We did." Later, as the day wound down and the sky turned pink, Marcus and Celeste sat on a bench outside the center. They watched families play on the lawn and heard laughter echo through the halls. Marcus turned to Celeste and said, "I never knew how much I needed your voice." She smiled. "And I never knew how loud a quiet warning could be." He reached into his pocket and brought out a small card. On it was printed in simple letters, "Partner, visionary, friend." He handed it to her. Celeste read the words and felt warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." Marcus squeezed her hand gently. "Thank you for everything you taught me." They sat together as the sun set, comfortable in each other's company. Behind them, the building glowed with life and purpose. Beyond that, the city lights blinked on one by one. In that moment, both knew the story they had begun together would continue to grow. Guided by respect, trust, and the power of listening to every voice, no matter how quiet.